most students apply through what's called regular decision, and typically those are deadlines that fall in January or February, and the student can apply to many schools that they're interested in, and they typically hear back by March or April. There is a misconception that it does. So I talked a little bit about the regular decision. There's actually two different flavors, if you will, of early applications. There's something called early action, which is a non-binding program, but the student typically applies at an earlier date, say November 1st or November 15th, and gets to hear by mid-December. There's also something called restrictive early action, which very few schools have, but you might have heard of them. Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Georgetown has a flavor of it, although they don't call it restrictive. But those, again, student applies early, finds out early, and is not bound to attend that institution. Early decision is very different. Early decision is a binding commitment that the student agrees if they are admitted, and again, typically they apply November 1st or November 15th, they agree that they will enroll in that institution. There are typically a larger percent of early decision students who are admitted, and that is sometimes misinterpreted as meaning that it is easier to get into the school through early decision, which is actually not the case. Typically, the strongest students applying to that institution will apply in the early decision round, and thus it can be misleading to look at the general statistics. This is an interesting question. So I would say the majority of the students in the world do not apply early decision. The majority of applications that are submitted around the world are not submitted through early decision. In fact, the majority of applications at SIS are not submitted through early decision. However, the majority of SIS seniors do tend to apply through an early program. So the most obvious thing is that you can relieve some anxiety if you go through the early decision process and you apply early and you find out early whether you're admitted. There's something a little bit freeing about that, right? You know early in your senior year where you're gonna go. There's a flip side to that. The con is you're stuck, right? So if you get admitted to that school, you are bound by that agreement and you have to attend there. So you don't get the chance to apply to more schools. You don't get the chance to apply, compare financial or merit scholarship kind of packages. And unique to the current world that we find ourselves in, you don't get the extra time to better understand what the state of the world is going to be like relative to COVID. And personally, I tend to push back for many reasons on early decision. But I really want students and families to be in a position 5 or 6 months from now to make a fully informed choice about where they're going to be. So the magic formula, right, that they're looking for. Spoiler alert, there is no magic formula for this. So there are quite a few misconceptions that I would love to address here. So you've heard some of my thoughts on early decision, and again, one of the biggest misconceptions is that I have to apply early decision. And in fact, one thing that troubles me is when a student comes in and says, I have to apply early decision, but I don't know where. And they're sort of flipping around. Really, you should fall in love, so to speak, with an institution and then decide, does it make sense for me to apply early decision? Another misconception is that a student should apply early decision regardless of their grades. And that could be looking at grades through the end of junior year, right? So colleges are interested in understanding the patterns. And if a student had a rough patch early on and has been on an upward trajectory, colleges are going to want to know how they're doing in their fall of their senior year. Similarly, if during senior year things aren't going as smoothly as one would hope, it may not be to the student's advantage to submit that early application, because we do share grades in progress through the end of October. And really there should be a discussion between the student and myself to understand, are you going to be putting your strongest foot forward to apply at this time, or does it make sense to wait until the January deadline? I have a few other misconceptions, so can I keep going? Mm-hmm. Okay. So probably unique to the SIS community is the perception that anything under a 1500 on the SAT is a bad score. And that is simply not true. This is an issue of sample selection bias, if you will. So if you compare, let's say even a 1400 worldwide would put a student in what's called the 94th percentile. That means they did better than or as good as 94% of students, the over 6.4 million students in the past 3 graduating classes. That's over 6 million students that they did better than. Okay, so 1400 is objectively a really, really great score. But again, when one's comparing oneself to SIS students, they tend to get the false impression that that might not be a good score. Another misconception is that subject tests matter. So there's a lot of students taking subject tests, and I hate to break it to you, but colleges aren't really looking at them. I know this very well. I spent the last 14 years working at the College Board. I'm one of the 2 people at the College Board who worked with Caltech, MIT, and Harvey Mudd when they made their policy decision pre-COVID to no longer require subject tests. So it's a test that has played a decreasing role over the last 10 to even 20 years, and now in a COVID world has almost no bearing. Another perception that students have is that the only thing on the transcript that matters is rank or GPA, and that is simply not true. They want to look at the patterns, they want to look into the weeds, so to speak. They're looking for consistencies, inconsistencies, they're looking at the full picture. Another misconception that I see, students feeling they have to take AP Calculus as a senior, or they will be looked at as less than by college admissions, and that's simply not true. In fact, students should work very closely with us to figure out what the best choices are that they can make for their courses for senior year. And there's a lot of different things that can shape that. Some people have the misunderstanding that they might think that personality or character doesn't matter in this process. In the US, for US colleges, they do care about that, and they want to know who our students are as people, right? They know we have strong students, they know you're going to bring a global perspective, and they really struggle to understand who you are as people. So we want to bring that to light. There's a misconception that more is better, right? And that could be in terms of more APs, right? Or more colleges, I have to apply to more recommendations, letters of recommendation they get. They might only have 7 to 10 minutes to read your entire application, so more is not necessarily better. And similarly, one thing you mentioned in terms of activities, right? More. Do I need to have more? No, they want to see sustained, authentic interest, right? Do things because you love doing them, not because you think it's going to look good on a college app. There are some misunderstandings, I think, in terms of college versus university, or public colleges versus private colleges. I won't go into too much detail, but just suffice it to say that you can get a great education at any one of those. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention I know there's a world out there that a lot of families are working with private consultants. I've seen some great things that they've told students, and then a lot of what I would characterize as misinformation. So again, there could be a perception out there that the consultant either has your best interests at heart or is giving accurate information, and that might or might not be true. It's very important to maintain high performance if that's the record that you have behind you, or again, if you've had some inconsistencies in the past. It's really important in that fall of senior year to show an upward trend, right? But it's also important that you take care of yourself, right? And find a balance between sleep and your health, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You need to find the right balance between the time that is on your coursework, which is hands down the most important thing that you need to be focused on, and then the time that you need to devote to putting your application together. And if we do our work right, you will spend a lot of time during your summer, in sort of off season, so to speak, to do a lot of that work so that you free your attention during the school year to focus on your classwork. That would be a risky approach to take. So colleges care not only how you do through the first quarter-ish, we don't really have quarters, but through the end of October, they care how you do through the first semester, and they still care through the end until graduation. So offers of admission are conditional. It's conditional upon a student maintaining the academic record that they were admitted on. So just because you're admitted somewhere doesn't mean you can slack, so to speak. Do something you love doing, and do it because for the right reasons, not because you think it's going to look good to a college. So again, if you feel the pressure to spend hundreds of hours doing SAT or subject test prep, I think it's the wrong decision. There are many more valuable things that you could be doing with your time. So spend some time with your family. Pick up a new hobby, right? Learn something new, but do it because you love doing it.